I don't know about you, but I like to believe in stars. The artist, the voice, the moment, the idea that greatness arrives fully formed. But history tells a different story because most movements are not built by individuals, they are built by systems, rooms, teams, structures, invisible architecture that shapes what we hear before we even press play. And if you follow the sound closely enough, you start to notice something patterns, similarities, a signature that doesn't belong to just one artist, but to something bigger. I am Adeolua, and this is Losing the Plot. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back to another episode, another Yap session. If this is your first time listening to Losing the Plot, my name is Adeolua, as I've said earlier, and this is Losing the Plot, a podcast where we talk about popular culture, especially music, and use our understanding of popular culture and our understanding of how these things work and how these things are to understand ourselves and the systems that we live in, right? I always love to say that when we're talking about something, we're not really talking about that thing. We're talking about wider things at play. So if this is your first time listening, welcome. And if I return Crown's Plotter, our listener base name, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about record labels. Yay. I think today's episode is going to be interesting because one of my favorite things to do on this podcast is to bring in my understanding of Western popular culture and my understanding of Nigerian entertainment scene, right? I'm Nigerian born and raised. Um but I also grew up in the States from my formative years. I grew up in the States. So I've always been kind of front row audience member watching how Nigerian popular culture interacts with Western popular culture and similarities and difference. Obviously, the United States is a behemoth, a cultural powerhouse, a mainstay. So they have influence on everybody. But that aside, because a country like Nigeria is so specific to itself, the way everybody is specific to themselves, things that fly over in the States have an interesting way of landing when they come to a country like Nigeria. So I've always been very interested about that. And growing up, as I've grown up, as usual, not as usual, but as I've grown up, record labels have been on my mind. There's no really escaping cultural um the cultural presence of record labels. And in Nigeria especially, a series of we had have had a series of very popular mainstay record labels that still dominate conversation today. And in today's video, I wanted to kind of talk about those, right? Cool. So, on this podcast, we've talked a lot about systems, different systems, um, throughout and through. But I find that record labels are such a crucial part of the music industry, because I think why they get a bad rep in general. We need them. We've needed them. They have been the ways that artists, musicians, are notoriously not the best with. Excuse me, notoriously not the best with money. So having this kind of system has been how a lot of your favorite artists have made it out. So I want to talk about record labels a little bit, right? So before record labels, music was something you owned, right? It was something you experienced live in rooms, in churches, in streets. Bringing back to my running theme on this podcast about music initially being a communal thing, music being something you shared in spaces with people. Music was community. But as technology has advanced and we've had different things come into the play, like the record player, the CD player, the internet, those technical advancements have had a direct impact on how we create and participate in music, right? Even the headphones, right? So before before the advent of technology, recording technology, let me say recording technology, if you wanted to hear a song, you had to hear it again in person. There was no replay, there was no distribution, there was no industry per se, right? But there was an invention that changed everything, and that was in 1877. Thomas Edison invented the phonograph, and for the first time, sound could be captured, stored, and replayed. And that moment of him inventing the phonograph, it didn't just change music, it created a possibility of a music business, because now music was no longer just a performance, it was a product that become a product. So the very first labels emerged around the early 1900s, and these were just companies that were recording artists, that they were just pressing record and pressing records and selling them. And some of those companies, surprise, surprise, you would still know today. Columbia Records, RCA Records, right? But at this point in their history, they are not creative companies; they are manufacturing companies, right? They're not really shaping the sound; they're just distributing it. So you essentially, because of the technology that was available at the time, you're just going in, they're pressing record for you to do what you're gonna do, and they'll help you package and sell it. But then, as obviously as we know, as technology begins to improve, something changes, right? And the labels realize that if they control the recording and they control the distribution and they control the promotion, guess what else they should control, or who else they should control? They should also control the artist, because like, you know what, like, low key, no shade, no Lipton, you ain't nothing without us, okay? And that is where the modern label is born. So not just as a distributor, but as a gatekeeper. And because they had a shift in thinking, they decided to decide who gets recorded, who gets heard, who becomes successful. They started to kind of create their own system. So by the time we get to the mid 20th centuries, right, mid 20th century, right, the labels are no longer passive; they are active creators of culture. Um, which is why labels like Motown Records are interesting to me. Uh, I guess we should address the elephant in the room: racism. Yeah. I'm sorry. Oh, I keep forget that some people listen to this with headphones, and I'm so sorry about that. But yeah, racism is a thing. We've talked about this in the genre episode a lot. How racism, kind of the way that technology affects how we do certain things and how we create music and receive music. Racism, surprise, surprise, no shocker, also has that effect. We talked about that with genres when we talk about the country episode, about who gets labeled as a country artist and who is credited for their contribution to country music. Kind of the same thing with record labels as well, because as I've mentioned, because these record labels are controlling the artist and who gets paid and who gets heard, because of racism, they can decide there literally was something called race records, which was code for this is for blacks, for the blacks, right? Um, so yeah, racism is a crucial component of this journey. But as we see, that's why the advent of something like Motown Records is even more fascinating, right? So Motown Records started in Detroit in the late 1950s, founded by Berry Gordy. If you're a little bit into the music industry, you know who Berry Gordy is. Berry Gordy is you know, he's so iconic because Berry Gordy gave us artists like Michael Jackson, the Jackson Five, Michael Jackson, a la the Jackson Five. We have Diana Ross, we have the Supremes. The Motown sound, the Motown look, is a thing even to this day. One of my favorite eras of music ever. I'm really a sucker for that clean, polished, pop, palatable. Right, but it really did take a lot of skill to be able to put that together. So it was very vision driven, manager, artist, developer person, and I in my intro, I was talking about how music movements really emerge from isolated artists. Because here, when we look back at the Motown era, we can look at Diana Ross, look at Michael Jackson, and look at all those people, but they were part of an era, right? So obviously, in every era, there'll be stars that will stand out and they will shine, but we don't get those people without the institution. And Berry Gordy is quintessential in building the institution of Motown and that label and that log. So from labels to producers to songwriters, creative ecosystems don't just release music, right? So Motown didn't just release music; they also brought life into these artists and said, you know what, do this, wear this, do that. This is how we're going to get to the people, and that's how they define how music sounds. So if you want to understand how entire eras of music are shaped, you have to study the factories, the people that brought them out. Labels are so critical to we look to different labels for different types of artists over time. Over time, as obviously as technology has advanced and the world starts to become more of a globalized village, the and genres become to blend even more. The line between what is an indie label to what is a pop label, and those lines are a bit more blurry, but that doesn't take away from the fact that we still have this understanding that labels are important, and no label or none of those more than Motown, for example. And I think as well, I do want to add that I because we're going to talk about Nigeria as well. So I think that structure, I don't know for a fact that Don Jazzy looked to Barry Gordy for inspiration. I don't know that for a fact, but that structure of one person being at the helm of controlling the sound and look of a generation consciously and working towards building that brand, it's a very very Gordy coded kind of message and kind of approach to making music and to being labeled. So I call labels sound factories because they are, but also because that is how we get to kind of the world that we have now, right? So let's move on. Let's talk about some artists in the Motown roster, right? We know the popular ones. We know the Michael Jackson. We know the Diana Ross of the world. But let's talk about the Funk Brothers, because I'm sure you don't know who the Funk Brothers are. And if you do, more power to you. So the Funk Brothers were the in-house band that played on countless records for Motown. So and the Funk Brothers are important because I want to parallel the Funk Brothers to Don Jazzy. So, for example, with More Hits in Nigeria, Don Jazzy was the in-house producer for a lot of More Hits records. With Mavins, in this new era of Mavins, they have more it's more varied as to who's making what for whom, but that is important because having an in-house band that plays on countless records creates a consistent sonic backbone. So when you hear a Motown record, you know it, and when you hear a Don Jazzy beat, for the most part, you know it, right? So artists like Stevie Wonder, the Supremes, Marvin Gaye, those different voices, those different types of stories, they exist in the same universe because their music in that part of their career was played by the same band. And Motown didn't just make stars, right? It had a sound. Motown had their own specific sound, and it works because what it did is it standardized excellence. There was quality control. So Motown was one of those. I think I like to believe that Motown was one of the first labels that was testing sounds and refining and reworking them until they fit the system. Really obsessed with what makes a song a hit, what makes a song a standard track, and the complex one of the many complex angles of Motown, of course, is that like I mentioned racism earlier. I didn't really get into that a little bit, but the existing big labels of the time, where a lot of them were white owned and prioritized their white artists and their white musicians, and for Berry Gordy to break into this new to break into the music space, he needed to reach the dominant popular audience, which are still white folks. And so his formula was kind of to like take these black artists and take their soul, dial it down a little bit, not do all that singing for real, all that hoodling and hollering, dial it down a little bit for real, and make a palatable still very Negro, you know what I'm saying? Still very Negro, but make it palatable for the white audience. And that's essentially the Motown's playbook. But it's so interesting that even though that was the Motown playbook, in my opinion, sometimes it doesn't really take away from the artistic merits of these records. I don't think anybody would even say it took away from the artistic merit. These are still excellent songs, excellent musicians, excellent songwriting. But Motown was definitely important for standardized excellence. And this is not to say that individual talents did not matter, because for sure, you can't be Diana Ross and not know how to sing for real. You can't be Michael Jackson and not know how to perform for real. You know what I'm saying? Like, while like there was a factory and there was a processing and all of that, their individual talent was still the thing. But while individual talent was very important, alignment mattered more because the goal wasn't just success; it was consistency. It was consistency of the sounds that emerged from that era. So I I just talking about Motown still, like one of Barry's big things that I still find very relevant to today is that with Barry, if the song didn't sound like a hit, it did not leave the building. Barry was very hit focused. Like like we talk a lot about a song being a banger now, but Barry Gordy was like, no, Barry Gordy is a granddad of like that's not a banger. And that DNA goes, it's a DNA that Michael Jackson inherits because we don't get Thriller and we don't get Bad without Michael Jackson not wanting to prove himself and to prove that he's a banger maker. Which one of the reasons why I find it so funny that we, obviously I know why, like Thriller is still revered as like, the best pop album of all time and all of that, but the same people that rate Thriller so highly, when an artist in the new generation releases a record of songs that are meant to be bangers, like, oh, the album sounds like a collection of singles. Meanwhile, the album that we praise for being the best pop album of all time is literally that. Again, skill level varies and results may vary based on skill level. Not everybody has Michael Jackson's ear, Michael Jackson's skill level, Michael Jackson's cultural awareness and just being in the moment, being of the moment. But really, that DNA of hits is something that MJ carries on. And just like I mentioned before that Motown was founded in Detroit, and if you know about American history, you know that in Detroit was famous for having car assembly lines, and many ways that culture was carried on into how Motown operated. Songs moved through Motown through stages like a factory. There was writing first, then arrangement, then recording, the quality control. It's like every Friday morning, Motown held meetings. They played songs, they critiqued, rejected, and refined the different songs. Like that level of just diligence onto the sound. And with the Funk Brothers, I think it's so interesting that a lot of people don't know about the Funk Brothers, but they really were at the center of that sound. And it's so funny that a group of people that people never really saw or pay attention to are the reason why we have the sound that we have, and they are so influential in that line. And with the Funk Brothers, they played more than just number one hits than they played on more like number one hits than other bands, right? Because again, same musicians, different artists, but same foundation, and that is very important. Now, what I'm building at here is just the history of Motown and how we get to like Motown's being creation and Barry Gordy. I also think it's very fascinating that because of how Motown created this universe for themselves, the Motown songs, even by different artists, they didn't feel like a collection of songs. It felt like a universe, like literally the Motown cinematic sonic universe. Because all the songs had a similar DNA. We're going through the same system of creation, and it shows in the sound, in what we arrive at. It really does show there. Okay, let's go over to the other side of the pond. Is that the other side of the pond? I don't know if Nigeria is the other side of the pond from the US of A, but let's say that. So in the mid 2000s, More Hits record was led by one Don Jazzy and the Banj, and this is where a lot of Nigerian popular music begins to get unified, right? Because of how coherent and recognizable the sound was. Not that there were no other players in the. You know what? In the episode about Afrobeat slowing down, I talk about what I consider to be Afrobeats and how I think it has slowed down, and now it's not essentially that. I'm talking about this era. This is the era where we are building that. Bright synths, playful melodies, confident delivery. You could. It was music then. I really want to give. I would give. Someone can fight me about it, but I would give More Hits a lot of credit for bringing that sound to the forefront, because it got to a point where you didn't have to check the credits of the songs. You just knew a More Hit song when you heard it. And at the center of that, similar to Berry Gordy, was Don Jazzy. I had to call it the Don Jazzy effect. At the center of More Hits is Don Jazzy, where he's not only the producer and the architect, but he's also curating the sound. So his role wasn't just making beats, it was defining direction and creating cohesion across all artists. Um, and in that way, in that way, for sure, he wasn't just producing songs; he was producing an era. And why this matters is because before more hits, Nigerian pop was more scattered. Like I'm thinking about Nigeria, Jaga, like that era before more hits, right? We are in the studio, we're making our own songs, but it's not definitely not refined, and it's not. It's just you can see you can hear the industry working out the kinks in real times on those records, right? There was just a definitely more experimental and more loose, so that people were making music and people were stumbling upon hits. A lot of people that blew up in that era could not replicate their success because it was just like the kinks were being worked out. But with more hits, what more hits did, I think, so well, so well, was create identity. This is the more hit sound. These are what more hits Nigerian pop stars look like, and that goes a long way. Then, because there was now a system, there was a more hit system. It also created consistency, which leads to cultural confidence, right? So again, kind of like again, I don't know that Don Jazzy even know who Berry Gordy is, but there are so many similarities between Mo Hits, Origin Days, and Motown as well, and them called being Momo. Are you sure? Cause Mo Hits, Motown. Okay. I mean, I don't know for a fact, but it's just like, 1 second. Let me Google that. Why origin of Mo Hits name? Because I'm just like, wait, hold on a second. Are you sure that Mo Hits is not a prayer to Motown? Mo Hits record label. Because if it is, that would be so kismet that I just randomly thought about them together and they actually are. Oh no. More hits. No, I think okay. I don't think it's named after Motown. Because that would have been crazy. That would have been really crazy. Okay, never mind. Moving on swiftly. But anyways, and as we all know, more hits became Mavins, right? So I think that goes without saying. Moving on swiftly. More hits, building pop stars, building a sound for Nigerian music industry, and the biggest gift that More Hits gave us, honestly, is that it gave Nigerian pop a sound that you could export Afrobeats with an S. Then we move on to system breaks, right? So as I mentioned before, More Hits dissolves, and for a moment, like that sound scatters. And what we experience here is like a clash of egos. Is the classical tale of like who is too big for the system, who is not. And we had the band then just doing things that was just so wild to think a Nigerian musician could accomplish. I remember when I believe it was the music video for Oliver Twist, I think, and Kanye West was in the music video, and I was like, wait, what? We doing Kanye? And this was Kanye when Kanye was Kanye West. You know what I'm saying? Like, like Mo Hits really was doing things that are just been or so exporting the artists that way. And of course there's Wande Coal, like Mo Hits was really that era. But that system disappears, and Don Jazzy, like a phoenix rises from the ashes and comes up with Mavin. And Mavin Records, with Mavins, right, it's like the same architect and new environments, but the rules are different for sure. Because Mavin brings us to the era of streaming, of global audiences, of faster cycles, of more visibility. And in this new era from Mavins, we have two of my favorite Nigerian pop stars of all time. I would say of all time because I'm so serious about that. Sorry, don't talk about Tiwa Savage. I'm so sorry, Auntie Tiwa, please. Yes, Tiwa Savage, y'all. Hey, but Tiwa Savage is Mavin, no? I think Tiwa Savage is technically Mavin. Yeah, sorry, my bad. Tiwa, so Tiwa from Mavin, Tiwa from Mavin for sure. Ricardo Banks from Mavin for sure. Rema, Ayra Starr, I think, bringing us into this new era, and I just told my favorite pop stars of all time. Those two, I just love how aware of their role as being pop stars is. Like they are two artists that didn't just wake up and became pop stars. Those are two artists that are so aware of branding, aware of like what an Ayra Starr fan, who an Ayra Starr fan is, and serve their audiences in that way. And again, they are kismet because they have come at such a time as this when they are needed, right? And with Mavin, what Mavin does very similar to Mo Hits and again Motown is that Mavin adapts the factory model but makes it more flexible, so more global, more digital first. And the sound again is less rigid compared to Mo Hits. I mentioned before that that would change where like with in this new era like globalization and all of internet, sound becomes more malleable, but with the sound is less rigid, more fluid, and more responsive to trends. So if Motown was structure and Mo Hits was identity, I would say that Mavin is adaptation. Now let's step back. Like, why am I talking about these three Negro corporations together, right? First, because I think I, just being a fan of music and music history, see a lot of similarities between all three. But even more than that, for just for my artist friends out there, what we can take away from this is that they didn't rely on individual genius, right? Is it something that we're so missing in today's ecosystem of I have my microphone, I have my videograph, my camera, I have my Pro Tools, I can be my own mixing, mastering engineer, songwriter, videographer, cameraman, branding person, blah, 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 and you can. And again, things are expensive, so maybe you should, but excuse me, there is nothing like working together with people to create something. It's something that is so missing in today's world, is that we are really better and stronger together, especially when it comes to art, especially when it comes to music. Because as we established, music has always been a community first thing. Music has always been first about the community that it comes from, the people that are listening to it, people that are enjoying it. It's what influences what instruments are in certain genres, the kind of lyric writing that goes in certain genres. Music is always community first. So when you take that community first mindedness of music and apply it to a factory like setting, push kaba, yes kaba, you could say, you have magic. Not surprisingly so, you know. You have magic, yeah. Motown, Mo Hits, Mavin, created environments where genius could repeat, and the difference between a moment and a movement is just that: intention. Intention. It's where a lot of labels fail as well. Is that there's just no grounding of the identity and their knowledge of their space in the world today. And I think it's important to have conversations like this today, because today we talk a lot about individual artists and not about systems. But we cannot run away from the fact that systems shape sound, systems shape opportunity, systems shape culture. It's inescapable, especially with art. And when you understand the system, you understand the music differently. It's something that we can't run away from. It's something that we can't run away from. For example, like with Mo Hit Record, right? In the mid 2000s Nigeria, when they came out, that was the era of CD era, radio dominance, club culture, and songs like "You Bad." Oh, that jazzy Ira's jazzy song takes me to a place sonically where I just like, oh, I love this song so much. Like "You Bad" and Tongolo, they weren't just hits, they were defining sound of a generation. And more is, you don't just make popular music, it made the default sound of Nigerian pop. And even Don Jazzy as a system designer, very similar to Berry Gordy, is that he was designing a system. Berry and Don Babaje have such great understanding of artist positioning, song structure, hook efficiency. Hook efficiency, is this a hit? And cultural timing, right? And it's what sets these labels apart, because you see labels where people are not reacting to the market, they are shaping it. And even after Mo Hit splits, and that system disappears, when Jazzy comes back again with Mavin, you see that he's now playing to the audience that he sees the world going to. So in that way, we are seeing that this is an architect that is aware of all the factors at play for his success. Because, for example, now in the streaming era, right, you have to say that the algorithm is part of the factory. You have to think about TikTok. You have to think about placement, virality, global renaissance, and all these things will change. All these different factors you have to consider when you're making together a system of sound will change as the years come and go. But that is why it's so important that you have and you consistently do you consistently have these cultural architects who are up for the task of thinking ahead of us, up for the task of wanting to know how to refine these movements, right? Because again, individual artists create movements, but factories create movements, and how we get to that is by repetition, refinement, consistency. Again, everything I've talked about with Motown and Berry Gordy, um, um, Motown and Berry Gordy scene here. Let's talk about a little bit of conflict, because again, with all these labels, we've had artists leave, people that were built by the sound and built by these sound factories leave them, and sometimes what happens is that when the system becomes too strong, it can limit individuality. So when they becomes too strong or things become too rigid, people start to sometimes rightfully so believe that they are bigger than the system. When they are like, it's kind of like the Disney system as well. When Disney was pumping out pop stars as well, right? Artists can start to sound too familiar, safe, and predictable, and then there's always going to be somebody in the say that, hey, we all sound the same. Like, I want to break from this mode and do my own thing. I want to break from this own, and because an artist is an artist is an artist is an artist is an artist, right? Artists will always want to break out and do their own thing. Okie dokie. So that's kind of all I have for you guys today. I just my thoughts on sound factories, and I promise you guys to never talk for the sake of talking. Like, I always want to just give you my true and honest things to the point where I've thought them through, and if I have more compelling thoughts about these in the future, you shall hear from me. Okay? So here's something to think about. When you hear a song you love, are you really hearing the artist or the system behind them? Think about your favorite artists and their favorite songs. Are their songs reminiscent of the world of their label that they come from, or are they specific to them? Right? Okay. If this episode changed how you think about music, I would appreciate if you did share it, because once you see the factory, you can't unhear it. Again, oh guys, we're rounding up to this is our 18th episode. Isn't that not crazy that I've been doing this for 18 weeks non-stop, back to back? That's insane if you ask me, but it's even more insane that you guys have been listening, and I really, really, really appreciate it. But yeah, we're wrapping up season 1 of Losing the Plot at the end of May, so I think we have 4 more episodes this season, and then I'm going to take a break, but I will be back just to let you guys know how I'm thinking. But it's crazy that we've been doing this for 18 weeks, you guys. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate everyone has been listening this long. It's the sun, the moon, and the skies to me. Thank you so much. I appreciate you greatly. Okay, and now we're here. So until next time, you guys know I will never leave you without saying this: greatness isn't a moment; it's maintenance. As long as you are still practicing, you are still progressing. And progress, my friends, never loses. Till next time, stay crowned. Goodbye.